Well, thank you all for coming out today. Again, my name is Rashida Manuel. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I've always been passionate about social justice. My mom is here. She can attest to that. And that's because of her. And so I have studied this. So my studies have been, my master's is in women's studies, but my focus was on race and reproduction. And so I am very interested in talking about how race has been created, what race means in this country, and also looking at racism and kind of deconstructing what racism is. Welcome. Thank you. So I'm going to go over race and racism, as I said before, and we'll go ahead and get started. If you have any questions, as Christina said, please write them down on your little Post-it. Raise your hand, and someone will bring you one of these if you need one.
They're really tiny, again, I'm sorry. Or a sheet of paper if you just want to rip off a sheet of paper.
Right. And then we have thoughts, feelings, questions, kind of large Post-it there, and you can just stick it up there. Again, welcome to those of you. We do have a couple more seats that I see.
Raise your hand if there's an empty seat next to you, please. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so I want to get started by talking about race. When you hear the term race, what does race mean to you? What does that mean? Can anyone tell me what race means? What is race?
Social construct.
A social construct, good. Color, good. What else?
Man-made oppression tool.
Man-made oppression tool, yes. It sounds like you could be up here talking.
Please, join in.
Yes. Okay, so I heard color, I heard a social construction, and I heard a man-made, what was it? Oppression tool. And so I want to talk about all of those. Those are all very good answers. Give yourself a hand. Applause. All right. So I have 3 definitions of race here. I'm going to get started with the first one. I don't know if you can see this, but it says race. A system of social signification in which specific meanings are attached to one's body based on skin color and other physical characteristics. So that kind of goes to what you said. You talked about color a little bit, and someone talked about social construction. So when we say social, we mean in the realm of our interactions with each other. So race isn't something that exists inside of us. It's not something that we're born with. It's something that is put onto our bodies. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So definition 2, I have race, a social phenomenon that explains power relations between groups of people. Okay? So that one, it kind of picks up where this one left off. It talks about the social aspect of race, but it also talks about the power relations. So we said that race exists in our interactions with each other. Well, not only are those interactions just aren't happening among equals. There are power dynamics in those interactions. Okay, and so some people exist in our social realm with more power than others. Okay, so are we good with this definition?
Yes.
Okay, and so definition 3. Race is a system of changing meanings ascribed to one's physical appearance that operates socially, ideologically, legally, and economically. Okay? So this is my favorite definition. I think they're all good, obviously, because I included them. But I really like this one. And so I want to unpack this one here. Okay? So again, this one talks about it being a system. And it says that it doesn't talk about, none of these definitions have talked about race as something that's biological. And I want to make sure that we understand that. I am operating from an understanding of race. It's not something that's passed down from family members, something that you get when you're born. You're just automatically black. Your skin is brown. But what does this brown skin mean? So when I was born with this skin. But the meaning of what this skin is it was something that just was put onto my body. Okay? And so it says that there's changing meanings, right? And so when we talk about changing meanings, what it means to be black hasn't always been the same, okay? So what it means for me to be black is different than what it might have meant for my mom to be black when she was born. I'm not going to say what year. I don't think she would care anyway. And what it might have meant for my grandmother. You know, so blackness changes over time. And I want to say this before I continue on. I'm going to continue talking about blackness and talking from a black perspective because I am black with a capital B. And so that is not only just a racial identity that has been put onto my body, but that is my political identity. I operate from a space of blackness, okay? So when I talk and I use examples, they're probably going to be about black people because that's the perspective that I'm coming from. And it's not meant to disrespect anyone. That's just my worldview, okay? All right. So, again, it says a system changing meaning. So we talked about the system. We talked about changing meanings. We talked about how it's put onto our bodies, physical appearance that operates socially, ideologically, legally, and economically. So we've kind of talked about social, right? We talked about how it exists outside of our bodies. We've kind of gone over that a lot. Do we understand that part, that it's a social construct?
Yes.
Okay. So ideologically, what does that mean to you when you hear that racism is ideological? Does anyone have anything they want to throw out? Okay, I'll continue on. Okay.
No long answer.
Right. So when we talk about ideology, I'm talking about that common sense knowledge, okay? This is stuff that you know without anyone ever having told you. We know what it means to be, what meanings have been attached to blackness. We know that to be black in this country is meant to mean that you are inferior, that you have less rights or less access to resources. We know all the stereotypes that exist about blackness, right? So those are ideologies. Those things happen before we even think. They're in our minds, before they're subconscious, okay? So an example, when these police officers, because that's why we're here, when they're out there killing people, it's not because they're in the moment they're like, oh, that person's black, I'm going to shoot them. It's already there. They have received all kinds of images in our society that to be black means that you are bad, that you are dangerous, that you are a threat, and that means that it's okay, and that I'm threatened by your presence, and that makes it okay for me to kill you, because I'm not hurting you, you're hurting me, just by being here and being black. Okay? So that's ideology. Legally, well, when these police officers kill these black men, and black women too, and black children too, when this happens, the legal system is not set up to protect the black people who are being killed. It's set up to protect the whiteness, and it's set up to protect the police officers who are doing this, carrying out this violence.
Yes.
Okay? So that's why we see people who are not being brought to justice, not what we would call justice. Am I making sense here? Yes. Are you following me? Okay. And then economically, there is a value that is assigned to race. Okay? And there's an economic value. And we can just see that by looking at the haves and the have-nots in this country, and what color do those haves and have-nots tend to be. Okay? So there is an economic value that exists that is attached to race. And so when I say that, what I had originally planned was to kind of look back historically at the laws in our country and how these things were created. But I don't have time for all of that today. So I just want you all to know that there is an economic system in place that benefits from this system of race. Okay. So let me see where I'm at right now.
Baby posted anybody? Baby posted. Nope. All right.
Okay. Okay, and so I talked about how race is not something that we're born with, but something that's put onto us. And so that's a process that's called racialization. Okay, so racialization is an ideological process. We talked about ideology, in which relationships, so our interactions with each other, social practices, and groups are assigned racial meaning. Okay? So we know that our bodies are assigned racial meaning. Maybe the way we communicate might have a racial meaning. Maybe the way that we learn has a racial meaning. The music we listen to, all of these things are ascribed a racial meaning. And that process is called racialization. Okay? All right. And so my main point here is that people are racialized. Our skin and our physical characteristics do not inherently mean inferiority or superiority. But these meanings are put onto our bodies as we exist in the social sphere. Okay? So are we good?
Yes.
All right. So next I want to talk about racism. So who can tell me what racism is? I know I have these a definition right behind my head, but does anyone have another definition of racism?
Mm-hmm. Well, the most important, I feel, is what you does say, is the system
I get tired of people acting like it's a feeling, it's what, and saying black people are racist is a system.
Right.
And attached to that system there is power.
Yes.
So.
Very good. Thank you. So she's right. Racism is a system, a highlighted system, of advantage and disadvantage based on race. Okay? So we have this whole construct of what race is. And in order for this construct to exist, we have to have racism to push it forth, right? Okay? So we talked about how there are meanings that are attached to race and to skin color, these characteristics, but there are advantages and disadvantages that are attached to that as well. Okay, and so often people, like you mentioned, I'm not sure what your name is, but you mentioned that people talk about race as like this individual thing, and they say, "Oh, that person is racist," or "That person is this." Well, racism is not about the individual. It's not about individual actions that people are doing. Racism is about the people who are within these institutions, within the system, who are perpetuating it. And it's a system, and we're all in this system. We are all in this system of racism, and so in some way we all perpetuate it without even knowing it. Okay. Alrighty. Let me see. I have to make sure that I'm going along here at the right time. Okay. So, okay. I have another definition of racism. Racism is about systems and institutions that work to privilege some individuals because of their perceived race and to limit the chances, the lives, the abilities, the access to resources, and the rights of others based on their perceived race. Okay? All right. So, I want to talk now about prejudice. So sometimes I think people think that prejudice is racism. But we have to remember that racism is that overarching system, and that within the system there's prejudice. Okay? So normally I would say I wouldn't keep reading these definitions to you all. I'd have you all read them, but I recognize that they're pretty small and you might not be able to see them. So I'm going to continue to read them to you. So prejudice. I put here pre-thought. So when you think about prejudice, I want you to think about thought, because that's the realm that it exists in, okay? And prejudice means to assign racial meaning to a person, group, or thing before you know anything about it. And so I talked before about how these things that we know, it's ideological, how ideology happens before we even think. So prejudice is subconscious. When people are carrying prejudices, they're not just carrying these, they're not thinking, oh, okay, you know what, I don't like black people today because black people do this. Okay, they're receiving messages through various institutions, through our schools, through our legal system, through the media, okay, through churches. They receive all of these, or I should say religion, they receive all of these messages, okay, about what race is, and they don't even have to consider it. It's just already there, okay? So that's what prejudice is. Discrimination. That's another thing that often gets confused with racism. Discrimination is an action. So people act on their prejudices within a system of racism, okay? So acting on prejudice and denying human rights and or fair treatment to a person or a group. That's what discrimination is. Discrimination is a choice. It's a behavior, okay? And someone can exhibit discrimination. People say, oh, black people can be racist. Black people are doing this. No, black people are not being racist. Now, black people can discriminate. You can have an action and you can say, I'm going to treat you differently because of whatever. But in this system of racism in this country,
That's right. It's not possible.
there is no way that a black person is going to be racist. Okay? All right. Do I need to wrap it up? Okay. All righty here.
She cooking though.
So I'm going to end on something big. White supremacy. All right. Okay.
Just get started.
So I'm going to talk about, I'm going to do 2 more minutes and then I'm going to shut up and sit down. All right. So white supremacy. White supremacy does not just mean white is right, okay? Right? So it means that our whole society, our whole legal system, the legal system, economic system, education system, etc., is structured around and built upon the idea of the rightness of whiteness, okay? So it's not like, white supremacy just means white people are great. No. That's not what it means. Doesn't mean that white people are the best. That's not what it means. It means that the whole structure of our society pivots on this understanding of whiteness, so that the norm in our society, the perspective that our society operates from, is a perspective that privileges whiteness. Okay? So, I think that one thing that I wanted to talk about. Well, I'm gonna save it. I'll just end there. Okay. Sorry.
How about this?
I don't have enough time.
How about this? Thank you.